Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. Joan served the state of California as a member on the Arts Council and on the Film Commission. She was formerly on the Architectural Commission and fulfilled 2 terms on the Fine Arts Commission for the city of Beverly Hills. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, Condé Nast Publications, and the Hearst Corporation, Joan covered the world of fashion, the mysteries of food, the excitement of theater, and the international art scene. She continues to find people who are on the cutting edge of their professions. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're taping at the Hollywood Museum in the fabulous historic Max Factor building on Highland Avenue. Our guests today are actors Richard Tanner and Stephanie Satie. Singer, performer, writer, Richard Tanner was born and raised in New York and graduated from Cornell, Phi Beta Kappa.
Oh, God.
We're dealing with smartness here as well as cabaret performing, songwriting, stage and TV acting. Where did this all start, Richard?
Well, that's kind of what the show I'm doing is about. Where did it start?
Oh, small parts. Where
Yes.
did it start?
After years of saying I would never, ever do a one-person show, I finally decided to do a one-person show back in 2012.
But was there show business in your family?
You know, it's really interesting, and again, a lot of this is in the show. My mom had a very interesting life. She emigrated from Russia. Her family emigrated from Russia to Shanghai. She studied.
Oh, she did.
She
to
was one of the Shanghai
That was
Jews
fabulous.
in the 20s, and she
so
studied
was Mike
with.
Medavoy. Mike Medavoy's family was there.
I got to make a note of that.
And I read about
Call Mike
those.
Medavoy. Hey, Mike, we have something in common.
Actually, I read about those people there.
Oh, there have been
it was
documentaries.
Fantastic.
And she studied with this renowned maestro, and after the war was able to get a scholarship to Juilliard, which got her out of China.
She studied there because
Piano.
they said that in this group of Jewish people there were all these cultural people who were teaching each other.
Well, this was mind you, this was they emigrated back in the 20s, but yes, there was this very rich cultural scene. There was the Shanghai. I mean, and now my parents unfortunately have passed away. I've inherited this wealth of info. You know, I have programs from the Shanghai Philharmonic. I have a letter from the conductor, this Maestro Paci, saying how he's going to basically at the end of the war during the war is going to have to dismantle the symphony because there's no money. It's really touching.
Oh, it's very interesting.
To answer your question, she got a scholarship to Juilliard. She had a very, she never performed concertized, but she accompanied Andrei Segovia. She got her teaching fellow there. My dad was an engineer who happened to love musicals and theater.
Smart from the engineer.
But the irony, and this is one of the ironies I talk about in the show, they were dead set against me going into the arts in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I had to study. I learned the piano. I learned the oboe. We were taken to theater. We were taken to the opera. We were taken to ballet. But nobody told us, my sister and I, that was just to make us well-rounded doctors and lawyers.
Oh, right. So is that why you went to Cornell?
No. I went to Cornell because I went to Cornell to be like an obedient son. It was actually the last time in my life that I did something that didn't feel entirely right.
Is that right? Was there a drama class there?
Yeah, of course. I mean, did I major in theater? God, no.
No?
That would have been too. I was the opposite of what we call a rebel.
Really?
But I did get cast in a play my freshman year. The funniest thing is that to please my parents, I took physics. And I auditioned for the play. And then I just came across all these. My mother never threw out a letter. I just came across a letter. And someone said, "We're so, don't worry about the play. It would have taken you away from your studies. And we're so happy you're studying physics." Well, like a week later, I got cast in the play, and I dropped physics.
Right. But I keep thinking Cornell, it's like the food hospitality center. Did they have good food classes?
They had great food. The truth is, I'm not a huge Cornell booster. It wasn't the right place for me at the time. It wasn't,
but you did tour on the cabaret scene, and was that your start, really?
Well, I got out of school, and I hit the ground running. I could not wait to get to New York and start auditioning. And I auditioned for everything at every crappy, if I could say that, little theater in church basements and lofts.
But that's great.
And, yeah, well, a lot of times there were more people on stage than the audience. But, you know, it was let's say from this advanced age, it was a good learning experience. But because I wasn't getting enough acting work, just to keep my brain and my creativity going, I started keeping notebooks. I started jotting things down, not really knowing why.
About what? Writing what?
Observations.
Like walking down the street, or
well,
I'm at a
short stories.
theater right now, and
yeah,
this
I mean,
is what
I
they're
had always
doing?
written. I had always written. I actually had something published in Esquire.
Oh, right. You've written for...
so, you know, just ideas for sketches, ideas for comedy. And then suddenly I started writing song lyrics. Oh. Because I was, you know, from the earliest age, I had been completely entranced with musicals, as my whole family was.
And you took oboe.
And I took yeah, a big popular instrument.
And you had
everybody always wants you to bring out the oboe at the party.
But you had the DNA from your mom. So you had that music thing.
Of course I do.
And when you talk about writing from all of these notebooks, you also have a lot of unpublished screenplays.
Oh my God, yes. Well, you have to if you live in Los Angeles. When you enter the border, they say
how many do you have?
Yes, how many do you have? 3? All right, you can stay for a few years.
Okay, so you're here. But anyway, so you started writing lyrics.
I started writing lyrics. I put an ad in Backstage. I got half a dozen responses.
For what?
For composers, because I was writing lyrics.
Oh, I got it.
And I won a guy and I like that. Within an hour, we'd written a song. Within another few meetings, we had a dozen. We put together an act. He went on to write a few little things like, oh, Ragtime, Once on This Island.
That's who you were working
with? Rocky. Hi,
Oh.
Steve Flaherty. Yeah.
I saw, Steve Flaherty. I saw Susical in Seattle. It was so great.
Yeah, I decided, as I used to say in the old version of the show, I decided to stick where the real money was in cabaret.
With you in cabaret,
Yeah,
right.
one of my many brilliant choices. But what's interesting, Joan, is that out of, I'd say 6 composers I met, I'd say 5 of them went on to have Broadway careers.
Isn't that
Isn't
right?
that interesting?
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
So, but you've been off Broadway. You're on TV.
Off Broadway.
But you were on TV.
Yeah, sure.
They weren't on TV. They were on Broadway.
That's right, Joan.
You did Golden Girls.
Screw them, right.
What kind of roles did you have in Golden Girls?
That was my first sort of prime time. Prior to that, I had been on a little-known show called First and 10, co-starring that famous, popular, hilarious TV star, O.J. Simpson.
Oh, what was it called? First and 10?
First and 10.
Oh, First and 10 of football? First and 10?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think that
No.
was very good. No.
So, yeah, Golden Girls was my first sort of primetime show, and I played young Stan in, they used to do flashbacks.
I see.
And I'm basically, you find out why Dorothy married me.
So you had a recurring role. You were there a lot.
I was on that show. The producers liked me. They put me on Empty Nest a bunch of times.
Oh, then you went to that.
But
And
in
then what
different-
about the agency? You did that?
The agency, now that was a role where I was in the pilot. I had a recurring role. We had the bad timing of the pilot. The whole plot of the pilot was somebody planting a bomb in New York City.
Oh, God.
Guess when the pilot was scheduled to air?
In September.
9/11. So, needless to say, people weren't exactly in the mood for a show about terrorism.
No.
It lasted 2 seasons, but...
But another interesting thing is, off-Broadway, you played in Grandma Sylvia's funeral.
Oh, you know about this, yeah.
Yes, I think I saw that.
Well, I
too.
didn't do it in New York. I originated the character here of a bad performance artist, which I
Tell
always
us what
thought
that was about.
Well, Grandma Sylvia's funeral was very much along the lines of Tony and Tina's wedding.
Oh,
So it was
right.
an audience
That's right. I remember,
participation
right.
thing.
Yeah, right.
And a friend said, hey, we're doing this thing. You're great at improv. You want to come in and get in on the ground floor? And I wasn't doing, like a lot of things, I was sort of between jobs, which you could...
So improv is really what you need when you do those kind of interactive things.
Yeah, and I was
isn't
lucky
it?
enough to, you know, in New York, I got to say, looking back, I may not have, you know, attained what I wanted to, which was, you know, star on a Broadway show or even get on, you know, get close
How
to a
many
Broadway
people
show.
now there are that?
But, you know, it was where I started songwriting. It's where I started doing stand-up. It's where I started improv. It's where I started doing sketch comedy. And all those things, you know, all those tools really did, you know, they all kind of, you know, went into this show.
For this play.
They all went into
small
this
parts.
show.
But you like storytelling because you're telling stories right now, and you belong to the Story Salon and the Drama Club that you started.
Oh,
so
boy,
tell us what those things are.
Well, you know, I did stand-up for a few years, about 10 years here, and what's great about stand-up is if you're a performer, you don't need somebody to offer you a role. All you need is a microphone. You write your own stuff, you direct your own stuff, and you're there.
And that's what you've done.
That's what I did out of necessity. Ultimately, you know, I didn't, the milieu was not exactly what I preferred to perform, and I like to perform for audiences who aren't drinking and heckling. You know, there's a real art to stand up.
How do you do that?
And it's a lot about audience control. And let me tell you, I started off with people who are really, you know, have made it quite big. Zach Galifianakis used to perform at these open nights, Jamie Kennedy, people like that.
Those same
these open
stages
mic nights,
that you were on,
yeah. And they, man, to see them at work, they just had it. They knew they could get an audience to shut up and listen. I had to really, I was a nice Jewish boy. It took me a lot longer to do that. So,
but how do you do that? You must
if I knew how to do it, I'd be on the road doing it.
Oh, I see.
But that segued into, you know, there was a movement in the 90s. Kathy Griffith started it, Beth Lapidus, of alternative comedy. Suddenly it moved to sort of coffee houses, and you could go up with some notes, and maybe not everything would get a laugh, some like slightly more conceptual comedy.
But was it tryout? Was it trying out for a bigger thing, or was it an actual show?
It was an actual show. It was an actual show, and I took to that much more readily, and then that sort of evolved into storytelling. Good old-fashioned storytelling, like This American Life, like The Moth.
I love it. I
love
those.
all of it. And I think we're at a real renaissance right now. You turn on the radio, there's half a dozen fantastic storytelling
and you
programs.
Listen to them.
You listen, and you don't. There doesn't have to be a setup, punchline,
and the lights, and the action, and the music.
And you're not competing with people talking.
What is it? Is it the voice that's telling it, or is it the story that's carrying you?
Oh, I think it's. You know what? I really do think it's the latter. I think it's the writing and the story.
Writing. Because you love stories, so
yeah.
So that's what you would think. And sometimes I think it's the voice.
I think sometimes it's the. Look, in the ideal world, it's the ideal combination is where you have David Sedaris, who's brilliantly funny if you just read him, but then if you listen to him tell his stories, it's twice as funny because he's got this wonderful cadence to his voice.
So because you love stories, now you're talking. You're telling stories in small parts, or is it one big story?
Here's what it is. I resisted, as I said, for years doing a solo show. I didn't want to be just another actor doing a solo show. I said if I ever did one, I was not just going to get up on stage and tell stories. So this is a multimedia piece. I created animation for it with the help of Jerry Witt. I have, you know, I have
so is
subtitles.
The animation in the background?
There's a constant interflow of music, video, projections that talk back to me, animation, audience participation. So this show, the challenge for me, the challenge last time was to see if all these technical elements work.
Yeah.
The challenge this time was to see if I could, first of all, I cut it down to an hour.
Yes, because you only have so long anyway, right?
And to simplify it and to be able to exactly get in and get out. Which if I, you know, my goal is to bring this to other festivals and to maybe tour it. That's what you kind of have to do.
So that's where it'll go on tour.
That's my goal.
And it tells your story. Small part. You have a small part.
See the show.
You guys.
It has multiple implications.
Okay. Well, we're not going to give any more away, we're not going to unclothe you, Richard.
Oh, I'm happy to do that.
No.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for being here.
That's the problem. Nobody ever asks. Nobody ever asks.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Boy, did that go quickly.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with Stephanie Satie. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're at the Hollywood Museum taping, and I'm with actress Stephanie Satie, who studied with Martha Graham and Stella Adler, and her career progressed from dancer to actor-writer while she was teaching, traveling, studying, and performing. She's worked on and off Broadway, as well as with film and TV. And I love the lineup of musicals. The national tours, my favorites, Fiddler and Zorba and South Pacific and The King and I. So those are just my favorites. And you've been in a lot more than that.
Yeah.
I think your forte, though, is dialect. And were those national touring companies, did you use a dialect in those?
I didn't, and I didn't even know. I knew when I was a little kid that I had this facility, but I didn't use them. I didn't know it.
But we're talking about Zorba, the Greek. We're talking about Fiddler with those Russian accents.
Well, Fiddler, they didn't let us use accents. It was really stipulated by Jerome Robbins and by everyone, no accents.
Really?
A hint that the dialogue itself lends itself. It has a certain rhythm, but no
Yes,
accents.
because it does have a rhythm, and you think that it's when I think about it, I think it's sung with accents.
It's not.
Isn't that interesting?
In the film, they did it a little bit, and it didn't. It sounded like somebody who came to New York, you know,
trying to have an accent.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, that's very interesting because I guess with Jerome Robbins writing the music.
No, Jerome Robbins did the choreography.
Did the choreography.
But, Leonard Bernstein and.
But they didn't want the accent. They wanted their work. Well, when we were talking about choreography, so that showed their work and showed the accent.
They wanted
in a way.
authenticity, but they didn't want multiple levels of everybody's version of accents. And I think it worked out.
So how did you happen to get in all these films, and how did you be at Martha Graham? And tell us about it.
I was a little kid who was a hypochondriac. I mean,
you were sick all the time?
I was sick all the time, and I never even thought about this until I got here. And the baby doctor said to my mother, give her ballet lessons. So
Where were you?
I was in Brooklyn.
You were in New York, so you were born and bred in Brooklyn.
Yes, I was.
Okay.
And I went to dance classes, and I never had another my head, my stomach, my arm, my leg, nothing.
Couldn't think about it.
Nothing. And I studied ballet when I was a little kid, and then when I was 14, I realized I didn't have the greatest turnout, isn't that? So I went to Martha Graham, and I got a scholarship to the teenage classes there. But Martha taught some of them. It was, I mean, these are the giants of the century.
How fabulous.
Yeah. And then I did this Fiddler tour. It was the national tour, Fiddler on the Roof. And
when you do a tour like that, how many cities do you go to? Many?
Oh, yeah. Well, we did. Because it was a first-class tour, and it was the early one, we were sometimes 9 weeks in a place.
Oh, so you got to settle in a little bit. Oh,
I was
which
on that
nice.
tour for a little over a year.
Oh, wow.
We were 9 weeks. We were 2 months in Boston, 4 weeks in, or maybe 2 weeks in Quebec, and 2 weeks in Montreal, and 2 weeks in Toronto. But I think we did no 1 weekers.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
So you had a really nice
Very nice.
tour.
Very nice.
And were you getting coached along the way in the musicals? Did they coach you?
No, I mean, we would have understudy rehearsals. I was an understudy for a while, then did the role of Chava. But no, we would do our understudy rehearsals. We would go to dance classes. We would go to museums. We would, you
had a chance to really feel the city.
Yeah.
But did you audition for these roles?
Oh yeah, I auditioned for everything, and I mean, I started as a dancer, and then I started, then I started voice lessons, and then as soon as I got back from Fiddler, I said, I've got to act. I've got bad feet, bad this, and I went to Stella Adler, who, I mean, she's a tough, a tough giant.
Really, really tough.
I was not uninspired for the 2 years I was there.
Your mother sent you to dance class. Was she a stage mom?
No.
No? Was there show business in your family?
No, but they loved it. They were immigrants, and they all played the piano.
Oh, so you had some music.
Something, and my aunt would have liked to have been my stage mother.
Your aunt, which is great,
yeah,
right?
She said to my mother, she said, she doesn't belong in that local school. Let's get her to the city.
Good for her, because you need somebody strong like that pushing you.
You do.
And then, so when you talk about your parents being immigrants, your one-person plays are about immigrants.
They are.
So one's like refugees, one's silent witnesses. What was the other one?
Coming to America.
Coming to America.
I think it's because, my mother came here when she was young, but old enough to remember. She was about 6, and they never talked about the past. That was a generation that just didn't. You're in America now. And so I didn't realize how hungry I was for stories. So when I was putting myself through school, college.
At Hunter?
No, here.
Oh, here.
It was like 20 years
in
later.
LA, right.
I got a job teaching English as a second language. And most of my students were, it was the early 90s, were from Russia, Armenia,
right.
Iran, because there was the Iran-Iraq War. That's most of them. And I would come into the teacher's room and do their accents and do what had happened in the class. And all the teachers said, write this stuff.
How could you do their accents? Did you get coached on dialect?
No.
Because
you know,
it's
like
very
I can,
difficult.
you know, like I can morph. You know, I can talk to somebody and then I listen, and there it is.
That's it?
That's
Just
it.
like that?
Just like that.
So you were with these Armenian immigrants, because I want to talk about your director, is
Yes.
Anita Kanzadian.
Yes.
Is that him?
Yes.
And she directed a play, Let the Rock
Yes.
Speak, by Lily Tomashin.
Yes.
And you were in it.
I was in it.
And I saw it.
Yes.
But I didn't know you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how did you use that accent?
No,
Did other people's some used accents, some didn't?
Some didn't. I think the older people used it in that. But no, but by then I was using accents. And I think my mother knew I could do it when I was a little kid, because I'd come home from school and she'd say, who are you talking like today?
Oh, she knew.
And I would say nobody, but it was that friend or that friend, you know, and I was really interested in the accents, and I became interested in the stories behind them. And there was something, and I started to study languages, there's something about when you can learn another language, and especially if you have a good ear, it's almost as if the untapped part of your personality, if you were Armenian or Persian, comes out.
That's how you do you teach that?
I teach it. I teach literature, so I.
Oh, you teach literature.
Yeah.
Do you add that to anything? Because it's hard.
I do. When I read something to them, I'll flip into
have them
absolutely.
do this kind of thing. Because let's talk about Let the Rock Speak, because that's a good story.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story.
And tell us your role.
I was in the chorus in this one. Anita said, you've got to do this. And I said, I would love to do this. I think it's wonderful. So it was ostensibly about these two daughters who had lost their mother in one of the marches through Syria during the genocide.
Through the genocide.
Yeah. And it was basically their story, but there were a whole bunch of others who were playing sort of the dead.
Yes, those were the rocks
living the
that were
memories
speaking.
that were coming up out of the rocks.
So, had you already written your one-woman plays?
I
Or
had
were you
written
just starting?
Refugees. No, I had written Refugees, and I was just finishing Coming to America.
Oh, you
Just
were.
finishing it,
So
yeah.
did that lead into your storytelling? Did that help you with storytelling?
Oh, absolutely. It was one more story. And Anita had already directed me in Refugees, was directing me in Let the Rock Speak, and was directing me and dramaturging Coming to America. And it was
she
just sort of
was.
a natural progression. We've done lots of
So
things.
you've worked together a lot.
Yeah.
But how did you get together?
How did we get together? I vaguely knew her in New York. We were in the same theater company for a little while, but I hardly knew her. And then when I came out here, she was so highly recommended when I produced a play at Theater 40 that I was in. I called her, but she couldn't do it. And then we did work together on something. We both won Drama-Log Awards at the same night for something. And I said, will you look at this?
And you
It was
came together?
Refugees,
Yeah,
and she came to my house.
Oh, so Refugees is about, tell us.
Is about the students that I taught in the English as a second language
that's
classroom.
great.
I played myself as the teacher. I played the students. I played the husbands of some of them.
Oh, you did?
The manager of the school.
So
yeah.
how many characters would have been in that?
13, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
So and how do you change from person to person?
Well, Anita is great about signaling this. There was one character who always wore sunglasses because her husband was hitting her. So,
she was black and blue.
She was black and blue. And then there was another character who she suffered from so much arthritis, she had to sit like this all the time. You know what I mean? So that the physical, there would be a physical change, and maybe a scarf, maybe glasses.
That's what I wondered. Lighting?
Lighting when we can get it, but I've sometimes done it
But
in
sometimes
libraries.
you don't have.
You know.
Oh, in libraries.
Yeah.
Oh, so you have to just use your body.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, so let's talk about Silent Witnesses, because that's the one that you're doing here. Is it the Hollywood Fringe?
I did it at the Whitefire Solo Fest last year, and then I did a run last year.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay,
then
tell
I
us
took
about
it to
that.
So anyway, this is this is the toughest one I've ever done, because this is based on interviews with child survivors of the Holocaust. They were 4 years old. They were 5 years old, and they lived. They were hidden. Most of them were hidden on the outside, hidden in small rural towns. Some of them were hidden for a while, hid in the forest, and then went to Auschwitz.
Then they still went.
One of them did. One of them still went and lived. And I was doing Coming to America as a parlor performance, and for Janine, and at the Q&A, I mean, I knew that most of these people were child survivors, and one of them, I looked into the audience, and I knew a lot of them were social workers and psychologists, and I also just couldn't help myself. I said, "You're so good looking." And one of them said, "Well, nobody saves the ugly puppies."
Oh my gosh!
Now,
so
first of all, it's
what
not
a moving,
what a moving thing, but it's not always true, because people died when they were beautiful.
I know, but the
still,
point that she thought of herself like that too.
That's right, and so
because that's what made her survive.
That's what made her survive, or she felt that way anyway.
Exactly, she felt that made her survive.
And she said, "Why don't you do our stories?" And I asked the hostess the next week. She gave me a list of 16 people who were willing to talk to me. And the summer of 2005, I started visiting people, and they talked to me.
Silent. They were silent all the time.
They couldn't say anything. They couldn't say anything because they divulged themselves. And then afterwards, because they weren't Holocaust victims, they were off the radar. They had no numbers. One of them did, but they weren't. Nobody wanted to hear. They expected them to quietly assimilate and not dwell on the past. And
they wanted to too, didn't they?
Well,
did they assimilate?
They did assimilate, but they also were carrying this stuff.
Yes, they were
with them.
carrying it, but they do assimilate.
They do assimilate.
Yeah,
they do.
But
assimilate.
it probably was like a really cleansing situation for you to talk to them.
It was. They had started talking years before.
They had started the dialogue.
They had, and a lot of them volunteer at the Museum of Tolerance.
Oh, right, which is fabulous.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was just this gift that fell on me,
and you had to do it.
Literally had to do it. But Dana, the first one I interviewed, has become a friend of my heart. She just said, "I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm giving you this. I'm just giving it to you." And it was,
And did they have accents too?
I can't hear any accent in Dana except her own just speech pattern. Some of them have accents.
So
some
when
of
you
them have
do
less.
these, when you talk, when these silent witnesses talk, they don't talk in accents.
They do. I have 4 of them in this show. One of them is from Belgium. She still has an accent because she didn't come to America until she was in her 40s.
But she has a Belgian accent, French accent.
Yeah. Dana doesn't have an accent, but she has a decided way of speaking, and I didn't want to speak as myself. So we're sort of a hybrid. Paula has a slight Polish Yiddish accent, but I have made it stronger
so that she identifies, right?
Exactly, exactly. And she knows. She says, "I know, I don't speak quite like that, but you exaggerated it." And she knows it. And they all come to see it, and I can't tell you how nervous it made me and still makes me the first time.
How long is the show?
The show is 83 minutes. It's not morbid. People should not be afraid.
Thanks for watching. Keep writing to JAQUINN1 at AOL.com.